Hello and welcome back. Today I have decided to give myself a challenge because I'm a glutton for punishment. Not really, but I might be in this case. A client sent this watch over from Norway to be sorted out. It is gaining time. He's had it to JLC and they said it would be very expensive to repair. So he had to decline because it was more than he could afford, and frankly he could pretty much buy a new JLC for the repair cost. And any watchmaker he took it to said it was in too bad a condition to be repaired. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what I have installed. So as I pre-discussed with the client that should this watch be or movement be unrepairable, we would see if we could find donor, because it is in a 18 karat gold case, and you do get these in gold plated as well, so we'll try and get a watch out of it in any case. Okay, moment of truth. Oh look at that. To be honest, I don't know what people will be going on. First impression, this looks pretty good. Let's pop it on the time graph, see what it does. Well, that looks interesting. Let's dial up. Let's do crown up. Not much difference. Quickly, let's demagnetize this, see if that's the issue. No, that did very little. So yeah, let's get into this watch and see what we can do. So obviously, looking at the time graph, we're having a balance issue. That's my guess. Have a look under the microscope. Well, if you see the way the hairspring is looking a little stuttery in there, that is probably our issue. I think that hairspring is touching on the very inner coil, causing this to gain a lot of time because you're not getting the full swing as you would like with all the coils not touching each other. So there's only one thing to do, and that is to take the balance out and have a look at the hairspring and see if we can fix that. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the balance and see if we can fix the hairspring. Well, as I was going to take the screw out, I noticed that, if you can see that, give me a second, if you see that the end on the stud where it's connected in the pin is bent and touching the hairspring. So before I'm taking a hairspring even out of the balance cock, I'm going to bend that backwards so it's not touching the coil of the hairspring anymore, and see how the watch performs. There you can see that's been bent back, so let's see how this performs when I put it back into the movement. Okay, just by looking at the hairspring now, I'm quite hopeful that that's going to perform okay now. Well, in this case I'm going to start by removing the auto winding mechanism for the bumper automatic. It'd be fun to do a movement review on this one as well, so we can add JLC to the list of bumpers. So I do have a few movement reviews on the bumpers already, or at least I have the Suma to compare it with. I also want to do a review on the Amiga and Revue, all in due time. Well, it's a good start. Both the pivots on the hammer are good. No rust under here. If this service turns out to be straightforward with that little hairspring adjustment repair, I'm going to say in Norwegian what I think about the watchmakers that inspected this. If this turns out to be difficult, I'm not going to say anything, because then they were right and I was wrong. So, to take the movement out of the case, I'm going to unscrew this case screw. That holds the clamp down. What just flew off there? Just okay. See, I haven't worked on this before. Obviously, this is the ratchet. What happened there? I'm not sure. Anyway, let's take the case clamp off. I do believe that the this might be the actual ratchet for the movement here. Oops, let's get this off. So when I took this out, I actually released all the power reserve. Didn't mean to do that intentionally. Did not sound like we broke anything. So fingers crossed. I'll be more careful with that in the future. Anyway, let's get the movement out of the case. For that we have to release the stem. Pull out the front. Does look like we have this inner bit here. Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, let's just lift this up. And that releases our movement. Lift the dial off, there we go. There we have the power reserve disc. I can see somebody has glued half the dial on because the one dial foot is off, so we're going to solder a dial foot on here later on. So that could be attached as it should, and see if we can clean off that glue as well. So what is the case in this situation? Well, I'm just going to document where everything goes and take it apart one bit at a time. So I'm going to do this in time lapse because it's pretty much the same process. When I put the movement back together, just that this is in reverse. So yeah. Here I'm adding a little bit of solder to a new dial foot that I'm going to attach to the dial. So I like to pre-attach some solder onto the foot before I actually put it onto the dial. Here you can see I've lined up the dial foot where the old one was, and I'm just going to apply heat until the solder melts and hopefully don't burn the dial. Got the dial foot soldered on. A little bit rich in solder, but it doesn't matter on this. In this case, it's not going to make a difference, so I'm not going to do anything with that. At least it's very solid on there, and it's not going to break off. Proof is in the pudding. First of all, we haven't burnt the dial on the dial side of the dial, so that's good. And the important thing is that we can still fit the dial onto the movement. And that fits on very nicely there. Next, I'm going to start putting this movement back together. So we've fitted the shock jewels, very similar to the Sumo Flex. I do believe they did have a couple of spouts in court. I'm not quite sure how that turned out, but I'm sure you can find it on the World Wide Web. There will be some information hidden somewhere. If not, we might do an article on that later. But anyway, balance is moving nice and freely. Hairspring looks good, so I'm happy to continue putting this movement back together. First of all, we're going to take the balance cock off again and put the gear train onto the movement. I'd like to comment and say how nicely the base plate is decorated. Very fine pelage and kind of a starburst finish on the outer section here. Very nice finish. I'm going to put a droplet of oil in the center wheel and lower barrel bush. Get that ready. We might as well put, let's have a look, well, we can put the barrel in later on, but we have to fit the little bridge that holds the center wheel in place. What might help is if I put it in the right way. There we go. It's my first time working on one of these, so it might go a bit slower than usual, but I'll try my best. Before I continue, I might as well put together the intermediate winding wheels on the underside of the gear train. It's here. This little steel protection washer that goes in between the intermediate winding wheel and the plate, which is good. That's going to prevent it from wearing unnecessarily. I've already put a couple of drops of oil in there. We can fit the cover plate. Like so. Here we have the intermediate, I think that's the intermediate power reserve wheel here. We'll look a little bit more at this feature as we're putting it together now. It's very cool. Here we go. Now this is ready to go back onto the movement, but I like putting just a tiny droplet of oil onto the attaching surfaces of the setting lever screw, because so many instances this is an area where moisture comes in and this just rusts onto the plate, and you can't get the movement out of the case without being very forceful. So just in case, put a little bit of oil there. That will prevent that rusting and seizing in the future. Not really something by the book, but something I like to do. Okay, now I'll start by putting the ratchet wheel on, or what normally would be the ratchet wheel, but there's no direct ratchets onto the ratchet wheel. But here we go. Goes onto a square onto the barrel arbor, like so. And now we can put together our power reserve feature. Just need to make sure I put it in the right way around. So the fine teeth go on the bottom and the larger teeth go on the top. So it's a little bit of lubrication. So, just a little droplet of grease on the sliding surface In case that dust touch helps. So I set the fine gear on the bottom there. Have this gearing here that goes on top. I'm going to put a little bit of fine oil in this here so it keeps lubricated through the microscope, and that goes here. Sorry, I'm being a bit quiet because I'm just focusing on what I'm doing. Drop a little oil here. And this comes up here. So there's an intermediate wheel that connects to the ratchet wheel on the other side of the bridge. That will turn this around. That turns this wheel down here through the it's kind of like a mini diff, isn't it? Through there, and see, this will turn around. Oh, I thought that was easy, and I realised I'd forgotten to put the escape wheel in, as you do. Probably, well, every part is important, but quite well, recognisable part that you should notice is not in there. So let's try that. Escape wheel. This one is very gunked up and has a huge fibre around it, so I'm manually going to clean this up and of course remove the fibre, and then we'll put it in the movement. That looks a lot better, so I'm going to plum treat that and put it into the movement. So now we're back in action. We got the escape wheel in the movement as well. That's going to help in the performance. Now we can finish securing the bridge onto the plate here, base plate. It's looking pretty good. At this point, I feel like turning the movement around and fitting the winding and setting mechanism. So we've got a couple of things. The first thing I'm going to do is, I might as well fit it now because I feel that way inclined, and that is the clutch, cannon pinion clutch, and the clutch for the power reserve indicator. This clicks on like so. So easy, such a great construction. This comes on here, of course, turns around, it drives the intermediate wheel, drives the disc that comes on here. When the disc is full, the clutch keeps spinning when you're winding it, so it just goes to full, and then it should be full, so you should stop winding anyway, and it winds down. Brilliant construction, very, very nice. Oh, the cannon pinion, tiny little cannon pinion. Almost like a lady's movement. Press this on like so. Good. What I'm going to do now is fit the winding and sliding pinion. So if these parts need a little bit of grease, so the rule of thumb, or at least what I do, is put a little bit of grease on all the sliding surfaces. You'll have a little bit on the teeth, on the, not the winding teeth, but the gripping teeth of the winding pinion, and on the yoke sliding contact. So let's fit here's the sliding pinion in, and here's the winding pinion. Again, just want a little bit of grease on the winding stem. Quite a bit, doesn't hurt. Don't want to drown it in grease, but you want enough for it to stay lubricated. Now you slide the winding stem into the movement like so. So you've secured your winding pinion and sliding pinion. Now it's time to fit the setting lever. So the setting lever, I'll secure the setting lever by screwing it on from the underside. Now that's been secured, you can see that moving. Again, I want to just apply a little bit of grease on the sliding surfaces. This movement has a machined spring for the yoke here, so it's a machined yoke spring, very nice. Usually they're just a wire spring. These small threaded screws here. There we go, that's in place, beautifully made. We might as well put a tiny bit of grease on the spring touching surface as well here, because it's going to slide a bit back and forth as it's being tensioned. Going to put a bit of oil on the intermediate posts, also the intermediate wheel posts. Move it along. The engaging intermediate wheel has a tapered side where the sliding pinion engages, so make sure you put that wheel in with the tapered edge facing downwards. If you don't do that, you will notice it by it being very rough winding or setting mechanism. Right, I just dropped an intermediate wheel, so I'm going to go on the floor and search for it. I did find my intermediate wheel and a dial foot and a screw. So every time you dive down to the floor, you'll find something new. So to secure everything in place, we have this setting lever spring. Okay, let's get the bumper mechanism back in place, and then we can wind the movement and see how it performs. If it performs at all. Hopefully it will. So what I'm fitting here is a little bridge that that provides the jewel for the lower jewel for the oscillating weight out of the hammer. Sorry for the little glip. I actually remembered it might be a good idea to oil the movement, because this covers the center wheel pivot. So that's all been oiled now. This is held in place with 2 screws. There's a few scratches on this movement from a previous service, but nothing too bad actually. Overall, I think it survived very well for being, what, 70 years old? It has had the dial restored, but whoever restored it couldn't be bothered putting the dial foot on. It still looks nice, so I'm not going to say anything more about that. Let's have a look. So I did take this apart because I did want to have the I wanted to have it properly lubricated on the inside. Let's just make sure I put this back together in the right order. Well, I've gotten this back together and it's all nice and lubricated, and I put it together the right way. Before I put the auto winder on, I'm actually going to fit the pallet fork and the pallet, so that's ready. It's got a very long axle on this pallet fork, so hopefully that won't be too much fuss. Again, I'm going to do this under the microscope because I really don't want to break any parts here, because it would pretty much kill any, you know, I'm trying to make a living as well, and if I destroy the part, it would not be good. Alright, with the pallet fitted, I'm happy to put the, well, I kind of have to be able to wind the movement, fit the auto winding mechanism. Normally I would have that fitted later on, so after I've tested the movement and whatnot, but in this case I'm going to test it all put together. There's the hammer weight. There's the kind of winding ratchet thingamajig. Like so. Hopefully this bridge will just come on top here and hold it all in place. I'm going to give both those jewels a drop of oil on the inside of the jewel hole, just so that it's on the side of the jewel, so it's ready for the pivots. Could of course oil them afterwards, but I like doing it this way. So I'm going to balance this up under the microscope. I've got a couple of screws to hold that bridge in place. Well, when I was putting the explaining the power reserve, the clutch, and I said you don't really need to wind. Well, of course it will keep winding as you're wearing it if it's fully wound, because it's an automatic, and that clutch is going to allow it to do so without causing any issues. So you can see this, we got the teeth on the on the arbor of the oscillating weight. That will engage with these two for rocking it, and as it rocks, so now it's rocking away, so this is the winding, so it winds when you push it upwards, and it loads when it goes down and winds again. So you can see the little teeth here. So loading. Loading, winding, loading, winding, loading, winding. So now we can actually wind the movement. And you see this ratchet here is also the ratchet for the ratchet wheel. So now I'm going to oil the escape mechanism. So I'm going to do that by putting a little droplet of oil on the surface of the pallet jewel and transfer it onto the escape wheel. Okay, a bit of movie magic. I had to take everything apart because I did put the balance in and the amplitude was pretty poop. So I have put in a stronger braking grease on the mainspring because the gear train moves freely and the balance moves freely and the pallet fork moves freely, so I don't need a new mainspring, or that will do the trick. So let's get the balance back into the movement and see what it does. In correctly. Let's try and get that in again. And the balance moves freely, so it's a question of power into the mainspring. So now we're going to try and get this balance back into the movement. Get it to tick, so hopefully we hit it. Yeah, looks good. I'm going to put down the time graph and see what it does. The amplitude is a bit better, but not really where I wanted. I still believe that the mainspring is my issue, so I was quite happy to find a replacement mainspring, but that's not going to arrive before tomorrow, so I'm going to put this away and yeah, third time, maybe I'm lucky. Alright, after a lot of mucking around, I reshaped the boot pins, did a little bit more hairspring reshaping because it wasn't quite central, and that is pretty much you dial up position, you get 244 amplitude, not the greatest, but it's an old watch, there's a bit of wear on the barrel surface, I cannot get a new barrel. I'm not going to risk resurfacing it because it's if I ruin it, I ruin the watch, and it still works. The amplitude is acceptable, and So once I've got the power reserve and it will keep time, I'm happy. So that is dial up, turn around to dial down. That's a little bit of a variation, but not too bad. Pretty happy with that beat error, I've got to say. So it gains about 12 seconds a day. Dial down position, that's fine. That will be compensated when you wear it. Plus 8 seconds to 56 amplitude. Put it sideways, crown down. It's pretty good. Pretty good positional variation on this watch as well. So even though we don't have a amplitude of 270, it's above 220. 220 being, you know, clapped up old movement. 240 is all right, especially because I think it's a 70-odd-year-old watch with a power reserve. I'm not going to be too upset with that. I'll put it in a different positional variation here. So yeah, as I explained on the time graph shot, our amplitude is around 240. That's what I believe we have now. And so be it. I don't want to put a stronger mainspring in the watch. That might solve that, but I think we're just going to put it together as it is now, and it will last another 5 to 10 years until it needs the service next time. Now we're going to put the power reserve disc back on. Couple of intermediate wheels, not intimate wheels. Oh, quite simply, the power so this comes on here, and as you wind the watch, you can see that power reserve moving upwards. It reaches the end, like so, and as the watch starts winding down, this will go down the other way and come down to 0. Quite clever. Now it's time to fit the dial. And the dial screws. Fortunately, even though one dial fit was broken off, the dial screw was still in place. Nice and secure, like so. We have space to fit the hands as well. A tiny bit off center, but there's enough space, and I really don't want to. And this is so close, I don't think I can get it any better than that. So that's going to be fine. So. Good stuff. Next for the hands. Line them up. make sure they don't touch. Nice clearing there. So the last thing I've done is I have found a new second hand for the watch, because the other one had the back tip broken off and it didn't look very nice, so it's good. And the difference is that the tube here is tighter than the arbor coming up, so I'm just going to broach this up and see if we can fit it. For that job I have my trusty needle brooches, thin enough to go inside the tube of the hand. Simply broach it up a bit. So there's the hand in place. Now for casing removement, we have this case ring. We have this special clamp. Comes in underneath like that, like so. And we secure the clamp. This is one of these fun jobs. Let's try that again. This clamp, is that supposed to go? Okay, I have an idea. I think this clamp is supposed to go under. What? What's going on here? Nope. Well, excuse me while I try to figure this out. Okay, fine. It was simply a matter of pressing this inner case holder into the case. Now I think this clamp might not give me so much problem. Sometimes you just gotta go for it. All right. This should move freely over the clamp. Yeah, it does. Good. Moving back in. Whew. It's a cool movement and it's nice. It's a very nice gold case. I think I prefer one which didn't have the hairspring issues and maybe stainless steel case. I was a bit worried about gold. It's so thin around here, you really don't want to deform it or have anything happen. But there it is, back in its movement. We have it's an American case. And that's why it says Lecoultre, not Jeager Lecoultre. Here's the case back. I have to say the American gold cases have the most sober hallmarks. So basically this says it says 14 karat gold, and that's it. You know, sometimes it's nice with some shields and lines and all sorts of stuff we like here in Europe, but that's the way it is. So it's cool. You got the one spring on the to my left, and then you got the spring on the oscillating weight on the right. That's pretty nice. It's working as it should, and what I think of the movement, it's very cool. I like the power reserve dial. It's good construction. We'll see how that winds down once the watch has been tested. It's a cool watch. I think it's very elegant, beautiful lugs. Yes, it might have been redialed at some point, but it's fairly well done and looks fresh. Yeah, it's a nice watch. The movement's in good condition. I said a comment, I'd say something in Norwegian, but I won't say something in Norwegian because I think the watchmakers that refrain from working on this had a good point, because I've ended up spending close to 2 days working on this, whereas I could have put together, if I was working with modern watches, I could put together a lot of them. Good thing for the client, I'm only going to charge a fourth or less than what JLC would do to do the same job, or the other watchmaker he talked to. I'm also cheaper. I know JLC would get this to full running, like new spec. I'm sure they'll probably polish all the pivots and they'll do a great job. But for somebody who can't afford that, I think I'm a good option, because now it's running, it's clean, and it will keep decent time. So until next time, I hope you have a good one, and yeah, take care.